Welcome to episode 4 of Unpacking Pakistan. I'm Aneeqa Wattoo, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our new episode. This time on something that everyone's talking about. I think the whole nation is going through a collective kind of heartache after the Champions Trophy. And so we're here to talk about what happened, but also to go beyond that and see what's really going on with the sport of cricket in Pakistan in the last kind of 5 years. So without further ado, I want to get straight on and introduce my guests. I'm very excited here to have a panel of 3 guests, all of whom are experts on cricket in different areas. They have their expertise. And so I want to start by introducing and welcoming Dr. Ali Khan, who is Professor of Anthropology at the Mushtaq Ahmad Gurmani School of Humanities and Social Sciences at LUMS. He is the Dean of the school as well. He really needs no introduction. He has extensively researched Pakistani cinema, cricket, and other things. And he's co-authored various books on cricket, with the latest one being Cricket in Pakistan, Nation, Identity, and Politics. Welcome, Dr. Ali.
Thank you, Aneeqa.
Our second guest is Imran Ahmad Khan. He's a LUMS Gurmani School alumnus with extensive experience in sports management. He's played key roles in the Pakistan Cricket Board and the Pakistan Super League. He has overseen strategic growth, player acquisition, and major brand deals in his roles at PCB and PSL. And currently, he's serving as the co-founder and CEO of Epic Sports Consulting. Thank you, Imran, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And our next guest is Eman Arbab. I'm super excited to have her here. She is also a LUMS school alumnus, currently serving as a cricket analyst for Pakistan women's cricket at the PCB. She has hosted the Double Wicket Maiden podcast and has hosted players like Nida Dar and Fahim Ashraf while covering major tournaments such as the T20 World Cup and PSL. Thank you so much, Eman, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm going to get straight into it. And I'll start with asking a question of you, Ali. So we are at this moment, it was a really big moment for Pakistan. After about 30 years, Pakistan was hosting an international tournament. And the entire nation's hopes and dreams, and there's always so much emotional, there's so much emotion at stake when it comes to cricket. Everyone was watching this, everyone was looking forward to it. And then it was suddenly very disappointing. We exited without a single win. We know India refused to come and play here. It wasn't held the way it was envisioned at first. It was held here and in Dubai. Where do we stand today after that? And are there any kind of lessons or major takeaways from this whole experience?
Yeah, thank you, Aneeqa. I think that's the question on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Was this something that we should have gone ahead with or not? And I'm going to give just a few positives and a few not so positives as well. But I think the first thing, as you mentioned, is that it's almost 30 years, 1996, where we had a major tournament in Pakistan. And, a generation has passed without people seeing so many international teams in Pakistan, in Lahore. So, and also there were not going to be any more ICC events. So it was either going to be this or then wait another 30 years. So I think that was a very big deal, is that we did get that event and we did host it in Pakistan. I think that's very, very important. It's also important because I think that Pakistan almost had become like that child in the playground that isn't allowed to play with anyone else and had to look in from the outside. So, the feeling of being excluded was something that we were able to, I think, put aside. Beyond that, essential refurbishments of the stadiums, of 2 larger stadiums that we had, the upgrading of those stadiums was really, really essential. Hosting so many international teams, showing that we had the capability to host as many as we did. There were no problems of security, there were no logistical issues. So showing that we were capable of hosting an international event of this standard and of this magnitude, I think was very, very important. It also struck me, and here's both a positive and a negative, that because Pakistan's own performance was so poor, that it was nice to see crowds getting behind their second favorite teams.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was really, I think everyone would agree that The match that was held between Australia and England in Gaddafi Stadium was an electric match. It really was. And to see people really getting involved and getting behind players that they hadn't seen in the flesh ever. And many of these were people that, you really look up to and you want to see. So that was really, I think, a wonderful occasion. I think it was equally wonderful to see many Afghan supporters coming out to see Afghanistan matches. So I think that this was all very, very positive, I think. There have been kind of social media things about, we made a huge loss, and I don't think that was something taken seriously. But we did show that we were really excellent hosts. So I think all of this is, for me, on the positive side. On the negative side, apart from Pakistan's really, really poor performance as a team, and that disappointed all of us, I think the big issue was that India declined to play in Pakistan. And also, not only did they decline to play, but there was very late withdrawal in that sense. The decision came very late. Now, because the decision came so late, it messed up scheduling. It meant that, if I wanted to come from abroad, I, didn't know when to come. Yeah. So I think that was really, really unfortunate. We must also understand that I think Pakistan felt very, it was a big blow to us because we had hoped that by going to the Indian World Cup the year previously, that there would be some reciprocity shown by India. And we went to India, faced an extremely hostile crowd, in Ahmedabad at least. Elsewhere we were welcomed, but we faced an extremely hostile crowd. But the team still went. And I think rightly so, the PCB expected that there would be some level of reciprocity shown and that India would travel to Pakistan. So them not coming really did dilute the tournament, not only because they didn't come, they played their matches in Dubai, but the semi-final and the final was also held in Dubai, and that really did retract from the tournament somewhat. I will say also that, the Indian cricket team is a wonderful, wonderful team, very deserving winners, but they also have many, many fans in Pakistan. And, when I looked at the crowd, I could see people wearing Virat Kohli shirts. And that's a huge loss because I think, the opportunity to see some of these players live would have been, I think they would have been very, very warmly welcomed in Pakistan. So that, for me, was a huge disappointment. And I think my final point on this would be that I think the ICC did mess up the ceremony at the end where they didn't have any representatives from Pakistan.
It was a glaring omission. It was very obvious. Everyone was talking about it. It seemed quite embarrassing.
It certainly was. I think the PCB should have communicated a little bit better. As well. But you can't be a host who doesn't turn up to your own party, right?
Exactly,
so
of course.
I think that was a very poor end to the tournament. Lessons learned. I think the PCB did a fantastic job of getting things in place and running it. I think there's still quite a lot to do in terms of getting our own house in order. But overall, I'd say this is something that Pakistan should be very proud of.
Yeah, I agree. And I think about the loss you've spoken of, which is the loss of the people in just being able to see and witness and enjoy that level of international cricket and the players they love. I think that's definitely been felt by a lot of people. My second question, I think, that I was kind of thinking about when I was thinking about this topic is also linked with this disadvantage that we ultimately kind of keep facing. And I want to ask you, Imran, so you have worked with PCB extensively, and you've been instrumental in setting up PSL as we knew it. When we look at the increasing number of franchise leagues around the world right now, right, lots of them are being brought by Indians, by various Indian businesses, etc. And so there's a high chance that Pakistani players get excluded from those leagues, right? And what that robs those players of also is the chance to play with and against those great international players, right? So that's another loss that we're talking about. How can this situation, as it is now, jo current situation hai, how can this be mitigated for Pakistani cricket? Is there any kind of silver lining to this situation, or is this just how it's going to be?
It's hard to find a silver lining in this. And I think it dates back to the second season of the IPL. This is 2009, when a number of Pakistani players were part of the IPL auction and then they went unpicked.
Yeah.
And ever since, they've not been able to go to the IPL. So they've been sort of pariahs in franchise cricket when it comes to the IPL for well over 16, 15 years now. And slowly and gradually, you saw these IPL-owned teams buying franchises in other leagues. Initially, it wasn't that much of an issue. So you had the Knight Riders and the Royals in the CPL, and they would pick Pakistani players. Of late, however, there's been a play where they've not picked Pakistani players.
How long has it been? I think it was only...
I think about 3 or 4 years, because I remember Azam Khan played for the Royals in CPL. I know Hasnain, Naseem Shah, Yasir Shah, Shadab, they played for the Knight Riders in the CPL. But I think these last 3 or 4 years, you've seen that happen, not just in the CPL, but also in the SA20, the South Africa 20, where all 6 teams are IPL owned. No Pakistani player gets in. Some of them made the shortlist last year, but they didn't get into the teams themselves. And then you see something very similar in the ILT20, where Mumbai Indians, the Knight Riders, the Capitals, their franchises. And I think it's very hard to see a silver lining in this because, like Dr. Ali said, Pakistani players were like those kids in the park that didn't get a chance to play with the big boys. But the good thing in all of this is you've had 9 successful seasons of the PSL, which has done exactly what this hasn't done, this lack of opportunity for Pakistani players. So that's still there, and I think the idea right now needs to be to strengthen the PSL, to continue to make it more competitive, for you to continue to open up your local player pool to those opportunities. Because, I mean, all said and done, I understand people aren't very happy with the PSL when Pakistan doesn't do well at the international level, but it does fast track growth and development for local players.
Absolutely.
And it does widen the pool of Pakistani players. So to your question, hard to see the silver lining in your players being excluded from some of the top franchise competitions. And I do feel that's the future of the game. I feel there'd be less focus on bilateral cricket, more focus on league cricket moving forward in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So any and every opportunity that our players can get when they're not busy with the national team to go and ply their trade in other leagues, to get opportunities with franchises should be welcomed with open arms. I know the ECB, the England Cricket Board, recently put out a statement that, IPL-owned teams coming into the 100 will not lead to exclusion for Pakistani players. But it was a little funny because literally 3 weeks later, none of the Pakistani players were picked at the 100 draft. So, I mean, it doesn't look too bright for us at the 100 as well. आपको पहले मिल जाते थे 3-4 Pakistani players at the 100.
और अब बिल्कुल नहीं है.
Is the fun nahi hai. It's a mix of scheduling and NOC issues and other stuff. But I think this exclusion of Pakistani players will continue for a while until and unless things sort of soften up between India and Pakistan to an extent where such appearances are viewed as confidence-building measures. And as Dr. Ali would remember, I think it only takes a week or 10 days for Pakistan and India to get back at it when it comes to cricket. So
I'm noting confidence-building measures because I think it circles back to what Ali was also saying about this lack of reciprocity. And so even when I was thinking of the questions for this podcast, this theme of exclusion or loss sort of keeps coming up, right? It's like the loss felt by a nation, but also by the sport itself. And so I want to come to you, Eman, and I want to talk about women's cricket. And I want to share this here because Eman and I had an earlier very candid chat about this podcast, and something you said really struck me. You said, I'm so used to women's cricket being a footnote in so many conversations about the sport. And I hope that doesn't happen in this podcast. And that's one of the things I really want to remedy. But that is the issue. I absolutely agree that within sport in Pakistan, women's cricket has remained definitely marginalized when it comes to its coverage, when it comes to its, I'm thinking of all the things, right? I'm thinking about interest, marketing. And so I'm going to come back to this question later on. Ki kya problem hai? Why is it not reaching the kind of potential that it has, considering we have so many talented women players? But before this, because we're talking about these franchise leagues, the situation seems pretty similar there as well, right? We have not seen, there are no Pakistani players in women's IPL when we talk about these international leagues. Jo Australian badi league hai, women's Big Bash league, there has been no Pakistani player in that as well. The exception is Nida Dar, who has played for Sydney Thunder, right? And like
Very
that's
good. Yeah.
absolutely wonderful, and it's great to see, but it's one player. There's so much underrepresentation. So when all the money is in these kind of franchise leagues, and again, our players are not making it into them, you know, and you're someone who's currently working on women's cricket. So then how do you see this situation? And do you see a way out of this? What do you make of this situation?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the Pakistan-India conversations always inevitably bleed into women's cricket. Yeah. Right now, with the deal that the PCB and the ICC and BCCI have signed, no one's really talking about it, but there's a World Cup happening in India later this year.
Oh.
That we are hopefully going to be going to.
Do you think we can go?
I mean, we have to win the qualifiers first, but yeah. See, if it all goes well, do we go to India? Do we go to Dubai?
Yeah,
and then the same kind of
exactly.
things. The kind of the not getting to play with the big boys on the playground happens with us as well, in the sense that not only is it the WPL that we are excluded from, but I say this with respect for all the coaches and everyone involved in women's cricket, but women's cricket is a lot smaller than men's cricket. So a lot of the coaches, a lot of the voices, a lot of the scouts that scout for maybe an Australian team in the BBL are also helping out with, say, the Indian league or with the 100 or even with the CPL. So not only do you have Indian owners that play over here, which we definitely do, we also have the same kind of voices talking about the same kind of players again and again and again. And this is no, again, disrespect to them. I think we could definitely do a lot better of a job marketing our players and putting them onto the limelight. And I guess there's a lot of factors at play, but for sure, global exclusion is something that Pakistan women's cricket is very, very familiar with. When the 2023 T20 World Cup was happening in South Africa, that's when the first Women's Premier League draft was happening. So it was the World Cup. Everyone is there and everyone was talking about it. People were getting signed left and right. Bangladesh and Sri Lankan players in the first league did not get signed, but they were there at the World Cup. And they had a chance. Their names were on the list. The Fatma Sanas and Nida Dars and Bisma Maroof, Aisha Naseem, who had one of the best T20 knocks that any Pakistani player has ever done. She had it versus India in that tournament. She didn't even have a hope of being signed because her name wasn't on the list, right? So, and I think it's a cruel reminder in women's cricket because women's cricket is smaller. Yeah. Women's cricket is more of like a happy family sometimes where no one wants to talk about what's really going on with Pakistan. I think in men's cricket, things tend to get ugly and honest and truthful. People talk about it a lot. But with women's cricket, it's hard to talk about it.
What do you mean when you say, I'm very like curious about this, like this expression of like, this is like a happy family. What do you mean? You mean like it just doesn't make it into those serious conversations or discourses?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're so focused on loving each other and building each other up, which is really important. Women's cricket needs more of that. I watch the women's cricket team for the India team like it's my own, honestly. As passionate as I am, and we play them, but I care deeply about those players, and I know a lot of Indian friends of mine, journalists, fans, who don't care for the men's team, our men's team.
But they care for the women's team.
Exactly.
When it comes to Pakistan
absolutely.
Women's team, they care about it.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just my bubble, but the way I see it is a lot of difficult conversations that should be had in women's cricket aren't being had.
I think this is a very important point, actually. So when it comes to criticism or actually breaking down what's going wrong,
100%.
and the way it's done with men's cricket, those conversations are not happening.
To the point, sorry, I'm speaking for so long, but to the point that when the WPL was first announced, some of us actually had like this now delusional kind of thought that, oh, maybe the same kind of exclusions won't apply. Because we just didn't think that they could interfere this way. But of course they can. In hindsight, I'm like, okay, we were all incredibly silly and naive to think this. But it's just how
I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I want to circle back for a moment to the Champions Trophy again, because I feel like it's there on everyone's mind. So there's been a lot of talk, Ali, about like on-field analysis of what happened, right? Like we've seen like talk shows and podcasts and articles. And I want to talk a bit about kind of the off-field situation that has also played a part and maybe led to this. So to just put it into perspective, since the end of August 2021, there have been lots of, in 3 years, staggering changes when it comes to the board. We have had 4 different chairmen of the board. We've had 8 different head coaches. We've had 5 different chief selectors and 3 full-time captains. And all of that has kind of changed again and again. Right before the tournament, our Interior Minister, Mohsin Naqvi, was appointed as the chairman of PCB. How can players thrive in this environment of instability and also, all this kind of almost interference at the political level and these appointments and these frequent changes? Can we expect our players to thrive in this environment if this is how it's going to remain?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually this is very self-evident. The answer is self-evident. Everywhere that we look in Pakistan, you see that institutions have collapsed. Individuals may have done wonderful things, but institutions don't run on the basis of one individual. And if you're looking at sport in Pakistan, the warning signs are very much there because I'm old enough to have seen glory days for both hockey and for squash, and performance in both of these was so outstanding earlier on that you still look at the performance and you find that Pakistan is amongst the top performers to date, even though we haven't achieved anything for the last 20 years. So, institutions erode quickly. Now, I thought about this a little bit, and I felt that, look, all of us who are part of an institution, and I'm part of LUMS and PCB and other institutions, you just have to ask yourself one thing. What would you feel like if your direct supervisor and that person above them was changing every 3 months, right? So your boss is changing and your boss's boss is changing. Every 3 months, this is happening. Now, if there is so much change, is there any possible vision that you would have for an institution? Would that vision be passed on to me as an individual? What would I as an individual be doing? The only thing that I'll be doing is to keep my head down and to try and survive myself.
Yes, at the individual level.
At the individual level. Now, cricket is not an individual game. It is a team game. And therefore, you have to work as a team. Now, if you've got no culture of building a team and no idea of who's going to be coaching you and what they require, there is no direction. I don't think that be it Australia, be it India, be it any team, if they had this level of tumult in their board, then I don't think any one of them would have done better than us. It's a disaster, right? I mean, it's an absolute disaster because you just do not get across long-term planning. And for me, that reflects what is happening in Pakistan overall. We've always looked at short-term fixes, always short-term fixes. You look at, the politicians, the whole idea is that, look, I'm going to have maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years in power, so I'll do what I can while I'm here for myself. But then, I'm going to be voted out or whatever.
It's like a short-term thinking. Like you think of the next 5 years, and that's how you approach things.
Yeah.
Even like at a political level.
And that is destroying our cricket, right? I mean, for cricket, what you've got to do is you've got to make the board independent. You've got to de-link it from politics. You've got to provide a long-term plan which has broad-based support. Right? You get the experts in, you make them sit down, and you make them make this plan. I was discussing this slightly earlier, but I think it was in 1995 that the New Zealand board came to the conclusion that their board was a disaster. And that was having an impact on their playing. New Zealand is a very, very proud sporting nation, but up until around the 2000s, they had a very poor cricketing record. And they traced a lot of that back to this kind of revolving door syndrome in the board itself. There was no planning, there was no vision. And then they decided that, look, we've got to fix this. They modernized things. And from the 2000 onwards, this is a cricketing nation that has been amongst the top ones. And we've seen how well New Zealand have done. So making that change is going to have an impact on your cricketing culture as well. I think we also must recognize that where we have had stability in Pakistan cricket, we flourished.
Yes. So in those periods, it's actually happened.
We've done really well. And you can think of captains who've been in place for extended periods of time. We have done well. So, that allows you to build a culture. And you need to build a culture which allows people, individuals, to reach their potential and flourish. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the moment, the Pakistan team seems to be the only team where a new player will come in and in 1 year would have hit their peak. And by 21, 22, it's all downhill after that.
Yeah.
And that is, that's such a waste of potential. So, until we stop this musical chairs, can you blame the players? I really don't think so.
Yeah. And I mean, what you've said, I think another big example of that is Arshad Nadeem, and it's one case, it's individual brilliance,
yes.
It's resilience.
Yes.
And he's talked about this, right? About all the effort that was very much his own, not getting support. But at the institutional level, like you said, that hasn't happened. I want to go back to women's cricket and basically this Ali's comment made me think of this approach, right? There are different approaches. One approach is you let a sport evolve organically and you let it develop and you let it flourish. And another is very top-down kind of approach. So you put a lot of money into it and that's how you try to kind of boost it. When you look at women's cricket, and maybe it's rudimentary knowledge, but I have heard of cases where major cricket players have not been able to, let's say, show up for a league, right? Because of certain family constraints, certain social constraints, certain cultural constraints. Do you feel like, in your experience or the work you're doing, do you feel like that's a big part of why the sport is not taking off? Or is that something that you deal with every day, the kind of social and cultural barriers that there are to women accessing sport, to women's freedom? Is that something that you think about a lot? Or is it no, when you're working in this organization, then you're focusing on other things?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to minimize the cultural barriers or the societal expectations or even the things that our players have to hear or see or have done to them. That being said, the players that do come through into the PCB's domestic system and ultimately the national team are players that have very supportive families or have in some way or another convinced them to be supportive of the kind of path they're on. So they've already done the hard bit. The PCB's job here is then paramount. So you take the players that have already done all the hard work and then you develop them further. And then the PCB also has this very unique power where they can fix what is maybe not fixed, but they can kind of right what has maybe been done wrong in other sports, in other women's sports, which is that, women aren't going to be playing cricket on the streets. You're not going to find the next Fatma Sana playing cricket on the streets. All of these players that do come to the top do play because they have, kind of cousins, friends, supportive families.
Where are women?
Yeah, they're playing in schools. They're playing in universities. Exactly. So yes, so that's why we were talking about how LUMS doesn't have a cricket team either. And I think that's so important, and I say this all the time, because that is where the talent comes from. Because the parents will know that their girls are playing within the four walls of the school. The parents will know that the PCB comes for trials, it's the PCB's name on it. So that's where the PCB's role comes in.
So it was like a secure environment that could actually nurture talent that is not happening.
Absolutely. And fine, you know what? We don't need street cricket. As beautiful as it is to think that everyone starts from the streets.
It's idolized and it's in all the popular culture and films, street cricket is the space where...
But we're not going to get it. We're not going to... it's not going to... PCB is not going to come out and start fixing everything and station guards on every street and be like, okay, women play now. That's not going to happen. What we have to do is recognize as the PCB, as someone who works at the PCB, is that talent comes from the PCB. If we take our players and we say, oh, you're very good and you've done all this hard work, but we can't unfortunately develop the pool because of all these cultural barriers, then you're undermining your own power, your own name. The PCB last year conducted trials, and I don't know how many cities it was, maybe a dozen, maybe more, across Pakistan. And you know what? A lot less players showed up than I thought.
Achha, really?
But I know that when we go again this year, maybe more will show up. And even if they don't, we'll go again next year. And then we'll go again next year. And eventually parents will remember, families will remember that the PCB is coming to look for players. There's this player from this family that went and played a domestic tournament and she earned this much money and she took this many wickets and she scored this many runs and they took care of her. She stayed in a very safe hotel in Lahore and she trained with coaches and Saklan Mushtaq showed up and Sarfraz Ahmed showed up, which they did.
So that
at her under-19 tournament, they did.
Yeah.
They were there. They were involved heavily with the teams. And that's how cricket grows. That's the role of the PCB. So cultural and societal barriers are a massive, massive obstacle. And I know players personally, and I know the struggles they've faced. And honestly, I wouldn't wish that on any girl in the world, to have to fight for your career and your passion. But you know what? That's the hand we've been dealt. Now, as the PCB, what are we going to do to empower those who are already playing, but also find those who maybe should be playing and aren't? But yeah.
I want to ask you guys also, Imran and Ali, what do you think about this? This whole, I thought this is a very interesting comment. This talent not coming from kind of street culture and the way we imagine it. Like it's depicted a lot. Like I'm thinking of all the Bollywood films about this, right? Like someone is plucked off the streets because a woman actually broke out and she was out of her house and she was playing on the street. It's news to me that okay, this is happening at the school level and it needs to happen at that level, right? This actually links with like my next question, which is a big change we saw with the PTI government was Imran Khan's and the PTI government's kind of focus on imitating or modeling the Australian model when it comes to cricket as well, right? And the kind of hand that was dealt to department level cricket, where previously there used to be much more inter-school, inter-university, inter-department cricket, and then suddenly that shifted. So the sense I have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we had a more kind of vibrant domestic cricket culture before, and now it's not happening at that level or at that scale. Is that true, Imran? Am I right in saying this?
I wouldn't say that. I think we're back at the department model now.
Okay.
So there was about 2.5, 3 years of city or region-based cricket. But I feel like that isn't the right fix. Purely focusing on departmental cricket is not the right fix. About 20 odd years ago, when General Tawqir was the chairperson of PCB, they did another model where they basically drew up these regions on a piece of paper. And I think ultimately the issue is there organic organization of cricket at the grassroots level?
Yeah.
That is what happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, where mohalle walas were running clubs. Local sponsors were getting behind local players. And that happened because it was all being done organically. When you try and superimpose a system, what that does is you've got a good cream of 200 players or 300 players, but it really eats into what is happening at the grassroots level. So the biggest issue with that 6-team model that the PTI government, for example, or I wouldn't say the PTI government, Imran Khan sort of proposed was, there was no cricket at the grassroots level. You had no club cricket tournaments, you had no district level tournaments for about a year. And losing a year in your cricketing career is huge, right? And I don't feel the entire focus on departmental cricket alone is also the right fix. Sure, there's money in cricket that comes through these departments, which was all of a sudden, again, taken out in that 6-team model. But we don't let a system run for more than 2 years.
Which is exactly what
ultimately this is what causes issues. Now that 6-team tournament, as flawed as it was, had it run for 2 more years, you would have had more grassroots cricket coming up. But you decided to shift to another model 2 years later, right? And I think that's why we face these issues. You go right across the border in India, they've had Ranji Trophy for 75, 76 years. They've not tinkered with it. They've got their Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy that they don't tinker with, right? We cannot, sitting today, project when the next domestic one-day tournament will be, what dates the next domestic first-class tournament will be. You've got all of that mapped out in other countries for the next 2 or 3 years, right? So people know what their next 12 months look like.
We're making it up as we go along, almost like constantly.
Absolutely, and I feel like there's this obsession with focusing on quantity over quality. Like I saw a press release that said PCB is organizing X thousand cricket games in a year. That's not the PCB's job. I'm sorry, like building stadiums is also not the PCB's job.
Whose job is it?
Any federation building a stadium will go bankrupt.
ये मैंने अगली
You
बात
go
यही
to
पूछनी है,
local
the
governments,
financial
you go to
viability
federal
of
governments, you ask them to fund it because there's economic activity taking place in that province, in that state, in that city. You don't centralize the running of cricket in a manner where someone sitting at the PCB office is making hotel bookings for a Larkana v Dera Murad Jamali match. It's for people in Larkana cricket and Dera Murad
for them
Jamali
to do.
cricket to manage, right? So centralizing
But
things
बिल्कुल decentralized
in
इस तरह नहीं है.
Pakistan cricket, and it used to be decentralized, right? There was a time when cricket was organized in Karachi by the City Cricket Association, even international matches. International matches in Lahore were organized by the Lahore Cricket Association, right? There was no involvement of a
This is a completely different
PCB
world.
team
Yeah.
traveling across the world to organize matches. And I think when you try and superimpose a system is where the issue comes in. That's unfortunately what's happened with Pakistan cricket. And whilst you've done that, you've superimposed a system on multiple occasions. You've never really let one system run. किसी साल हम balls change करते हैं, किसी साल हम pitches change करते हैं, किसी साल we change the way players are brought into teams, किसी साल we fire a coach and then 2 years later he's again head coach.
Yeah.
And I think that is the state
very
of flux
impulsive,
that your
it's
cricket needs to come out of. And for there to just be consistency, normalcy,
I think we've
sukoon
circled back to the same.
is what your system needs.
Sukoon. I think this is going to be the highlight of this episode. कि हम बहुत बातें कर सकते हैं on revenue and all of this, but actually maybe what players also want is just consistency and sukoon, being able to predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years and know for certain where they're playing, what's happening, who's the chairman, what's the governance structure, all of it.
Which domestic team they're playing for?
Even that.
What format are they playing? I feel like we could do with certainty and consistency in our decision making, and that sort of trickles down into the team and into the players as well. And to your point, when you said that survival instinct kicks in, and the other thing that happens is you stop trusting people in the system, right? If I'm having a bad day as a cricketer, and I can't go to any coach within the system, that to me is very alarming, right? And then you've seen that. I'm like Babar Azam hasn't done well, right? But who does he turn to within the system? Because every 2 months, some days you tell him Hafiz is your coach. 2 months later, you tell him Gary Kirsten is your coach. A month later, you tell him Azhar Mahmood is your coach. Then you tell him Jason Gillespie is your coach. Then you tell him Aqib Javed is your coach.
So all
of this has happened in less than 12 months. Some days you tell him Shahid Aslam is your batting coach. Some days you tell him Mohammad Yusuf is your batting coach.
No, this is, even it sounds crazy. So there's no you'd say no sense of community or fraternity that players can kind of rely on.
There's a great sense of...
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems.
Please
the
break this
fraternity
down
is
for
the
me.
problem.
I
shouldn't say more. No, I shouldn't say more on this. You go ahead. I shouldn't say more.
I think there's a great sense of community. I think cricketers thrive on that, right? But that happens in the absence of a structure, right? The structure needs to empower a Babar Azam or a Mohammad Rizwan or X or Y or Z to work on their game, to enhance their game, right? He spoke about players peaking at the age of 21, 22, and that's because there's no structure that's present. Like right now, if a fast bowler gets injured, you don't have requisite rehab facilities in Pakistan for them to be able to come back. Go across the border, look at someone like Jasprit Bumrah, career-threatening back injuries, comes back and picks up 40 wickets in a test series in Australia, right? Look at your players who've come back from injuries. Look at Naseem, look at Shadab, look at Shaheen. Like Shaheen's come back from that knee injury, for example, in 2022. And I think this is mind-boggling for me. We want a high-performance setup. We want our team to do well. But the very basics of how you build that high-performance setup, they're missing. You don't have a rehab facility in Pakistan cricket. That's a very quick and easy fix, right? But that wouldn't happen if decision makers are changing every 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It's a long-term project.
So हम उसी बात पे वापस जा रहे हैं बार-बार.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Imran has covered so much of it. It's made me think it's actually so much of it is social and cultural and institutional. I was going to ask you, what's the domestic circuit scene for women's cricket? What's going on there? Is it a very similar situation?
Okay. So we had departments once upon a time, and all was not well, but all was going somewhere.
Okay.
Departments were dissolved, and we suddenly found ourselves without a system entirely. So we had what I like to call, well, they actually like to call triangular series in the name of domestic tournaments. The way it goes is, and I say this with complete honesty and no judgment, is that you know a World Cup is coming up, and you know you need to select the World Cup. You check the format of the World Cup. Okay, it's going to be an ODI World Cup. Will Pakistan be playing that ODI World Cup? Yes, they will. All right, before that ODI World Cup, we need a series. We don't get a series. Okay, fine, we don't have the money for a series. Okay, we'll have a domestic tournament. Let's have the domestic tournament have 3 teams. Put all the players that played the last ODI series in that. Put some backups. Put some old players that maybe don't play anymore, but just for like competition's sake. Have a 3-team tournament. Right after that, the best performers, probably the same people that play the last ODI series because there's no competition, will go into a camp for 15 days and then go to the World Cup.
Quick training.
Okay, next year there's a World Cup coming up again. Okay, this time it's T20. All right, let's have a domestic T20 tournament. After that, let's have a camp. Let's go to the World Cup. We get 1 win, 0 wins. We come home. We do it all over again. So that's our domestic system. In the last year, they have improved in the sense from 3 teams, we went to 6 all of a sudden. And it was like, wow, if you could have fielded 6 teams this entire time, why weren't you?
Yeah.
And, there's talks about, quality over quantity and all of those things. But those things in women's cricket are not real. Okay, the quality of cricket is not going to magically improve because you're not actually putting anything at the bottom. So what you need to do is you need to give them cricket. I was speaking to a cricketer who just played the national one-day tournament, and she was talking to me about how, she's been in the system for a long time. I know her name very well. I know I've seen her play T20 cricket. She said, this was the first time I was facing the new ball. And I said, you're an opener. And then she's like, yeah, but we just don't play one-day cricket in these kind of conditions. I wasn't facing the new ball then. And she's like, in T20 cricket, even if I would face it, wasn't doing what it was doing here. And maybe that's not possible, right? Maybe it was just a little bit more seam, a little bit more swing. She was a little bit scared and she was just saying this to kind of cover her low scores. But the point is that someone had been in the system for 7 years and is the same age as me. I'm 26, turning 27. Yeah, she's not played the new ball in one-day cricket.
Like
that doesn't make any sense. Anyways, so our domestic system needs a lot of work. Now there's 6, maybe 5 teams. No one knows. It depends on what the men are doing. We'll just copy them. Right now they're going with 5 at the champions level. So we'll go with 5 as well. There's no real academies feeding. There's no district level tournaments. These are all things that are in progress. And I can say this with a bit of confidence because we're trying. But it's basically, there's no system. What he was talking about, the decentralized system, is what India has. And India have just won 2 under-19 Women's World Cups back-to-back. I'd like to think their senior team is actually underperforming at the max level the way their system is built. What they have is it's decentralized in women's cricket as well. At every level, under 13, under 15, under 17, under 19, under 23, under 25, and then you've got senior. It's incredible, and everyone should be envious and everyone should be angry that we don't have this.
And learn from it as well.
But yes.
No, I think that answers it really well, actually. The last or second last thing I wanted to talk about is basically the financial, and this is open for all of you, and I'd love to hear what each of you thinks. Just the financial viability of cricket in Pakistan also, right? If we look at it from that angle. So if we consider the lack of bilateral trade with India, it certainly affects broadcast rights for Pakistan, right? There are limited rights. And there's no direct to TV operator. That also has an impact. So generally, a big source of revenue for cricket boards is this, right? Broadcast rights, direct to TV operators. Pakistan mein is waqt jo situation hai, financial viability ki for the sport as well, right? I think looking at some of the figures for the Champions Trophy also, and we've incurred a huge loss. What is the way to deal with that? What is the financial viability of it? Do we just kind of commercialize the sport more like other countries have done to make it financially viable? Can we do that right now?
So, 2 answers. I think the first one is, I don't think technically Pakistan would have made a loss at the Champions Trophy because I think the reporting there was they'd somehow built in capex into the P&L for the event, which can't be true. So yes, they've spent on the stadium, but that doesn't factor into the balance sheet for the tournament itself. They would have made money because the ICC pays a hosting fee for every game, plus they get gauge receipts, plus they would have gotten something from the Emirates Cricket Board for the games held there. But to the other question, I think Right now, the PCB is forced to rely, much like other smaller boards, on media rights distribution that comes from the ICC. So the PCB would get somewhere around $34 or $35 million a year from the ICC. And that's money that the ICC earns by selling media rights for ICC events, such as the Champions Trophy or the T20 World Cup. So that's one major source of revenue for PCB and for the smaller boards. Now, the differentiating factor between, say, a PCB and in England cricket, Cricket Australia, Cricket South Africa, BCCI, is the money that they're able to generate out of their media rights. So for every bilateral series you host in your country, you sell media rights.
And you earn money.
Some back of the hand working, I think an IPL game would be $13 odd million per game. Pakistan cricket combined across 2.5 years for all of their international cricket at home will probably make 70% of that, 60 plus games, one IPL game. One international match that the BCCI hosts in India, it could be against anyone. It could be against Afghanistan or Australia. They get about $8.1 million a game. And I'm just sort of building context of where we lag. Why this happens, I'll just spend a minute to talk about that. All of us pay a monthly retainer fee to get cable TV at home, right? But that money within the system goes back to the cable operator. It doesn't go back to the content creator, right? Because it doesn't go back to the content creator, I mean, assuming, there's about $500 million being circulated just through this subscription fee, and none of this money is going back to the content creator, what that does is you rely 100% on advertising revenue. So the reason why people hate TV viewing experience in Pakistan is because they see a lot of ads, but if you don't see those ads, there'll be no value. And I was heading a sports TV channel, so I got a lot of that wrath on some common WhatsApp groups that we're a part of.
Constant ads.
But there is no other way to justify that kind of spend.
That is the main revenue
and
generator.
That you need that to get to that 70% of one IPL value, one IPL game value, right? So you rely entirely on whatever advertising spend is available in the market, right? So bottom line is you're heavily reliant on ICC monies. You're not generating enough money in Pakistan because you've got this huge structural issue in the way that your broadcast industry operates. Sponsors are now looking at prioritizing. So they wouldn't put money in a Bangladesh v Pakistan, but they'd probably put money in a PSL. So those values are also coming down. And I think overall, I'm not too optimistic about the commercial future of the game. Just because right now it costs you more money to organize a cricket match in Pakistan. You're organizing a series against Bangladesh next month, the month after that. Then you're hosting Ireland and Afghanistan. There's no way you'll make money on that because you're getting $50,000 out of sponsorship for a day. You're getting about $100,000 out of broadcast for a day. You're spending more money in organizing that game. And at some point, someone will have to take that tough call. When the monies from the ICC start drying up, which will happen in the next media rights cycle, someone's going to turn around and say, this doesn't make financial sense. Stop hosting X number of international games in Pakistan. And I think this is a challenge that will come up, if not now, then in the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
और इसका follow-up question वही है, if we consider India's dominance in the international cricket situation with these big franchise leagues in so many ways, and we consider Pakistan's diplomatic relations and the consistent hostility that we've seen, I mean, it's gotten worse recently, like you said. If that situation doesn't change politically, then what happens to cricket? Then do we keep kind of being disadvantaged in this way? Can that situation change? Do you see it changing at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's a difficult one to answer, and I think one way to look at it is to give a little bit more context. So, I go back to 1952 when Pakistan entered the ICC with the support of India. So India actually sponsored Pakistan's entry into the ICC. You've got to think about this as it's only 5 years since partition. but India sponsors our entry into the ICC, and
Okay.
then we play our first ever international match against India in India. So the
Acha.
first series is with India, so they support us at that point. And then for many decades, the Indian and Pakistani boards are very supportive of one another.
Oh,
We
acha.
hold joint World Cups in 1987, 1996. We would have had another one, but that didn't go through. And a lot of this cooperation between the boards in the 70s, 80s, beyond that, even 90s, happens at a time when political tensions are quite high. So the boards are continuing to work together despite political animosity
Really?
happening. Absolutely. But I think the last 20 years, things have changed, and there are a few things that I think are particularly important. First of all, as we've all talked about, the IPL comes online in 2008, I think. And I think at that point, it leads to a really huge financial windfall for the BCCI, so much so that I think about 80% of the revenues of international cricket come from India. And I don't think that there's a sport that is that lopsided
Wait,
financially.
can you repeat that? Like, I'm sorry, I can't wrap my head
80% of
around
the
it.
revenues are coming from India. So, there's a huge misbalance there, really. It's worth keeping in mind that when India won the World Cup in 1983, the team celebrated by going to a fast food joint, right? They didn't at that point have the resources that they do
that they
now.
have now, yeah.
So you have the IPL coming on board. I think
It's an interesting
equally
example,
sort of
yeah.
important is that India's economy takes off after Manmohan Singh brings in certain reforms, and the economy becomes much stronger than it had been in the past. And then 2008, you have the Mumbai attacks, and that certainly has an impact on Pakistan-India relations. And then more recently, 10 years ago, Prime Minister Modi comes to power really on an anti-Pakistan mandate. So, what I often say is that while it's difficult for us as Pakistanis to look at it in this point of view, with this point of view, if you look at it from India's point of view, since 2008, and particularly since 2014, the Indian public sees Pakistan no longer as a kind of wayward sibling, as a kind of a bit of a nuisance country. They see it as an inimical and very hostile neighbor, a neighbor that was responsible for what is often dubbed the 9/11 of India in Mumbai. So it is India's viewpoint that whenever they have reached out to us with an olive branch or with a proposal that would have been positively looked at, that Pakistan have turned around and stabbed them in the back, be it Kargil or be it some other event, but that is the Indian viewpoint. Modi's government has also strengthened the hand of anti-Pakistan hardliners.
And strengthened that narrative.
And this has radicalized Indian society. Now, as a Pakistani, I can say that this is a very dangerous path to go down because we've already been down it.
Yes, we have been down with disastrous consequences.
And 40 years after it happened in Pakistan, we are still struggling
reeling from it
with the fallout of that extremism that did come into our society. But these hardline elements in India have been put in very important positions, including the BCCI, but also in universities and also in other areas.
It's everywhere.
So we should therefore not be surprised at what India is trying to do to Pakistan cricket, whether it's the IPL, whether it's the women's IPL. But India is in a position today in cricketing terms and beyond to not provide any immediate incentive to Pakistan, right? Why should they give us an olive branch at this time?
It doesn't make sense for them at all.
It doesn't make sense.
From any angle.
By refusing to play a bilateral series with Pakistan, they are crippling our financial ability, really. Because as Imran said, when you play India, you make money, right? It's a series that is going to bring you a financial windfall. So why should they do that at this particular time? But my question to your question further is that, and I think about this a lot, what is the end game for India as far as this is concerned? Right? I mean, do you want a marginalized and weak Pakistan as a cricket team? Because Pakistan is a team that in the past has been an extremely exciting, mercurial, charismatic team. This is a team that, developed reverse swing and the dusra and, has had so many cricketers that have made names for themselves. So international cricket without a strong Pakistan is going to be worse off.
Yeah.
In the short term, maybe you could marginalize the cricketing nation of Pakistan, but long term, just like we say West Indies needs to be strong for international cricket, we say Pakistan should be strong. There are only a handful of teams that really play international cricket.
Yeah.
So, by marginalizing
need to be
Pakistan,
facilitating each other.
I don't see what the end game is there really. If you take this beyond that a little bit and think about India-Pakistan relations, it's similar. What is the end game? Yes, both countries would have made mistakes in their relations, but nations also move on from that. They move on from the difficulties, move on from their past histories, and they make new destinies, just like Europe did, right? So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh had a shared past. We were one, we are now three. We also, whether we like it or not, going to have a shared future, right? That cannot be changed, I think. And we face so many of the same problems. Sitting in Lahore, we're choking from pollution.
Same.
Sitting in Delhi, you're choking from pollution.
Yeah.
There are millions of people that we have failed because they live in poverty and in abject poverty on top of that.
I was going to say a lot of our vulnerabilities are so shared.
Are very much the same. So, the countries need to sit down with good faith and a certain amount of maturity. I think an unstable Pakistan is not a benefit to anyone in the region. Our political problems have caused far too much, I think, heartache and misery to the ordinary citizens of both countries. I would like to look at the optimistic side also, which is that, given even a small opportunity, this relationship between Pakistan and India is like a desert receiving rain and suddenly blooming. And in the past, small steps have led to enormous returns.
It's in the BJP climate that we're seeing this.
Yeah, I think at the moment it's a very difficult time. India is going down a path of intolerance. Anti-Pakistan rhetoric is high and it sells at the moment. So, that is a problem. But, how long are we going to keep people waiting for peace? I don't think that's fair on the people of both nations.
No, I think that's a great note, actually, to lead to the end of the conversation. And I've taken some notes and I want to quote them. What is the end game for India is something I want to say. And I think a lot of words that all of you three said, I've been noting them down. So need for stability, consistency, and maturity at all levels. I think it's at the international level, not isolating Pakistan in this way, but also internally in our own kind of political governance and structures. I have more questions written down because I had so many questions. So I am not an expert on cricket. This is very much not my area of expertise. But I was speaking these last few weeks to so many friends and people, and everyone is so into cricket. They all had questions. So a lot of this list is coming from friends. And there were other questions. But I think because of time, we're a bit limited. I want to thank you, Imran. Thank you, Eman. And thank you, Ali. Thank you so much for giving time. Thank you so much for being as kind of honest as you can and for being so generous with your experiences, with sharing your experiences, with your opinions. I think I've certainly learned a lot. I'm hoping our viewers also get to untangle and unpack a little bit what's going wrong and what's the way out and towards hopefully a more positive future. for cricket in Pakistan and internationally. I want to thank you guys for watching this episode. Thank you for sticking around, and we continue to hold this podcast. We continue to want to host such conversations that bring in nuanced perspectives. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you very much.